Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, we've been looking at all sorts of strange things on this channel, and nothing is stranger than the inventions of that man, Mr. Tesla. He has been one of those that people quote left, right, and centre all over the place. And he's supposed to have done some amazing things, including not creating, but I suppose exploring and discovering free energy. And he's often quoted with his Tesla coils, and we've seen the Tesla cars coming out. Not that he necessarily was responsible for those. I think someone nicked his name for that. But the question is, did he really exist? Now, you might be thinking, of course he existed. You know, there's pictures of him. There's all his inventions all over there. There's patents all over. Patently, he must have existed. Well, a gentleman who I've had on the show a couple of times now talking about Tartaria and the Tartarian Empire is questioning that. He's not saying he does or he doesn't. And he's recently written a book all about Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids and the Tartarian Empire. He's been on the show. His name is Guy Anderson, and he's joining me now. Hello, Guy.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for having me back.
Lovely to have you back. And true as your word, you've written a book and you sent me a copy in the post, and here it is. We'll put a link in the description if anybody would like to read it. I have read it. It's a great read. You talk about so many interesting things, mostly to do with the Tartarian Empire and how, you know, the great mud floods have come and people have tried to hide it. Dresden, and was that really to hide the last buildings or many of the incredible buildings that were around in the potential Tartarian Empire? But I'm curious about Tesla because he is held up as this incredible polymath in a way, this genius who's created so many patents. He's given people like Clive de Carle, who's been on the show, these Tesla machines that he's since bought up because he gave away the patents for free so that people could make the health things. But all the energy stuff he's done. But the question is, and you mention it in your book, did he actually exist? What do you think?
Yeah, this is something I would love to get to the bottom of. And the problem I found is I can find old film footage of Edison and Einstein but nothing of Nikola Tesla. And I would just love to know if anybody out there actually has ever seen anything, any movie or film footage of him. Because
Yeah.
all I can find are photographs, and there aren't very many. When we look on Google Images, we tend to find the same pictures all the time of him.
Yes.
There's some of him where he appears to be middle-aged, and then quite a few of him right towards the end of his life. He died when he was 86, and they all seem to be taken around then. So there's very little on him. There's nothing from his childhood really, and nothing in between these periods of time. So I just think for someone who was so much at the forefront of technology, for there not to be any film or movie footage of him is really unusual. But
And just a handful of pictures, you know, you'd think, because
mm,
he gave demonstrations and talks, and you
mm,
would think that all these sort of things would have been covered by the press, or keen photographers and all of that. So it is
mm,
a bit odd. You're quite right.
mm,
So that does, and all the inventions that he did, you know, I suppose it's like the old Shakespeare thing, who wrote all
yes,
these plays, and
yes,
people say, well, did he? How could
mm,
somebody write so much, so prolifically, and be so good on each one?
yeah.
I mean, there are special individuals who seem to be touched by some sort of genius, but these days we're questioning everything, aren't we?
We are, yeah. I mean, people also say that about J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter
They
books.
do. I know.
Yeah, I've
I've
heard
read
that.
that.
Mm. You,
And Napoleon is another one that I
uh-huh.
know that you've also you question in the book. Was
Mm,
he just a made up character or a useful device, I suppose, to pin
mm.
historic events on?
Yeah, yeah. Because I have this theory that quite often they'll put a name to something just so they can blame someone. And we know who these people are that are causing the problems. I mean, you know, for example, the First World War. I mean, Cecil Rhodes and you know, the Rothschilds and so on were behind it all. I think the Rothschilds have always funded both sides of most wars, but you know, we instantly look at somebody to blame, and someone is almost perhaps a scapegoat. And I did ask on your show before, you know, did Napoleon exist? Is he the person that we've been led to believe, or is he just a name that's been given to an event or a series of atrocities? And of course, the same with what happened in New York on the 11th of September back then. I don't know what we're allowed to say and not say on your
Well,
channel. I'm
this is
being
it, you
very
know.
careful.
But
Um,
with Napoleon, it's interesting because I remember you mentioned that on the last time you were
mm,
on, and I had an email from somebody or a phone call from somebody, I can't remember, and they said, "Oh, that's ridiculous about Napoleon. He is the most written about character
mm,
in books and magazines and films and things, and there's so much information, and then what goes through my mind is that business about you protest too much,
mhm.
that the more you write about somebody or something, the more it is you're really trying to make that stick.
Yes.
um, I mean, we're told now that Churchill didn't write all his memoirs and all the books that he
Yeah.
wrote.
Yeah.
We're also told that he was working on the other side.
Mm,
So it's so difficult to know where to go with all of these. It's such a
yes.
challenge.
I suppose my answer to that particular person that emailed or called would be I believe actually Jesus would be the person that appeared in more books and stories,
Well, that's true.
so where do you want to draw the line with this? And
And
unless
you've
this,
also questioned that, haven't you? You've questioned
yeah, I mean,
as many people have.
yeah, I mean, I think the problem is because when I started digging into Tartaria and this sort of forgotten, almost hidden empire, that I realized that they're possible, that they're capable, sorry, of doing absolutely anything. They can
Mm.
remove any trace of anyone and then come up with a whole new narrative. And we go to school and we're taught all of
Yeah.
these things, but we're taught it from a very young age, so we don't question it. We've also been taught not to question it. To you can't pass your history exams if you're questioning the questions themselves or what you've been told to revise and study and learn. So
Well, yeah, you could imagine, in an English or a history exam, and it says, tell us the history of Napoleon or Tesla or Churchill or one of these characters, and you just put one line. Yeah, well, the biography is as follows: he didn't exist; it was made
yeah,
up.
yeah,
I think you might
exactly.
fail on that, mightn't you?
Yeah. So I think that it's become very difficult now um, to actually work out in your own mind whether what you've been taught or even what you're reading now. When some of the rabbit holes I venture down, I often wonder if they've been put there so I can go down them and not pay too much attention to something else that's actually going on. And are they sort of misdirection, just forms of misdirection? But
Yes.
Tesla is an anomaly because, unlike Napoleon and Jesus and Genghis Khan and all of these people, we would expect to see some sort of footage of Tesla, especially someone that was so involved with technology. To think that there's not a single piece of footage with him around, not that I can find. I mean, I might
Mm.
be wrong. Maybe there's something somewhere, and I'd love someone to send it to me because I'm not saying he didn't exist. I'm saying I'm finding it very, very difficult to find anything of him other than the same old photographs online and the same old narrative. I'd just like to find something else. And his backstory from birth is very bizarre. I mean, the beginning of his life, it's almost like reading the birth of a superhero or Superman or something like that. It's
So, tell us a little bit about him then.
well, he was born in. People argue between whether or not it was Bosnia or Croatia that he was born in, but he was born during a lightning strike,
Wow.
and the midwife actually said that he will be a child of darkness. And
Wow,
his
that's a strange thing to say,
yeah,
during a lightning strike. Oh, he will
yeah,
obviously be instead of the opposite.
yeah. But his mother actually argued, no, he will be a child of light.
Right.
And from a very early age, he had visions. So he would almost black out. And apparently, the same thing happened to his mother. His mother would just have visions. And I don't want to use this line because it's just reminded me of a 70s comedian, but not a lot of people know that. But his mother was an inventor too. As a hobby, she used to actually invent household appliances just to make things easier for her. But she actually did go on to invent these things. And she says that's something she shared with him, the visions.
Mm.
And he would often black out. And he had them to a point where he couldn't determine whether the whole experience while he was having the vision was actually was real or a vision, and he believed he was slipping into a different dimension. Some people would say that he was actually communicating with something or someone else from somewhere else.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it's all a little bit,
And
you
I mean,
know.
this is very much coming into the public consciousness now. I mean, we now seeing many more videos on platforms like this on YouTube and of course on some of the lesser known platforms like Odyssey and Rumble and things like that, in which many people are suggesting that our history is not as it was, that there were different beings that came down, or that there are light beings around us. And we know that people meditate or contact source and all those sort of things. And people do get inspiration for different things. And some people, as we said at the beginning, are more gifted at that than others,
Yes.
which helps advance humanity, I suppose.
Mm.
We do need people to advance humanity, otherwise we'd still be in the caves,
Mm.
apparently.
Yeah.
So these visions were of the technology or the
Mm.
idea of how to improve existing thing. I mean, some of them were just incredible things that he did.
Yes, yes. I mean, he actually stated that when he thought after one of these visions, when he thought up an invention like the Tesla coil or neon lights, radio controlled boats. I mean, that was something that he invented, and but probably more famous for the Tesla coil. But also a lot of people might not know that he perhaps the invention. I believe if he existed and everything we're told about him is true, then it was the death ray that was his last invention that was the cause of his death. But he said that without exception, every single invention that had ever come into his mind had worked out exactly how he had planned it. There was
Yeah.
never an exception. And that these visions were so detailed, he didn't have to draw or write anything down.
Wow.
It was all stored perfectly.
I
Now,
mean, that is incredible, isn't it? And I
yeah.
suppose, and if true, then you think that must be a gift from somewhere else, because
Mm,
as humans we are fallible, and
mm,
fallible. We make
mm,
mistakes, and you think, oh, I'll do this. Oh, I can improve this, and this didn't quite work.
mm.
But if everything works straight off the bat, you just think, well, that's got to be help from somewhere else, isn't it?
Yeah, divine intervention,
Yeah.
yeah, but his sort of childhood is a bizarre one because at 5 years old, his brother fell from a horse and was killed. He didn't die instantly, but he died shortly after that, and Nikola actually witnessed that and was with him at the time, and they say that changed him forever. It
Mm.
had such a detrimental effect to him. But at 15, he contracted cholera, and his father, who was a priest, wanted him to become a priest too, and that was always his path. That had been
Right.
decided that he would follow in his father's footsteps. But he was absolutely obsessed with engineering, and his father said to him, if you can make it through, if you can recover from cholera, and you become fit and strong, then your reward will be to go to engineering school in Austria. I will pay for that for you and make sure that happens if you can fight and beat this.
That's
So I,
good motivation, isn't it? Good
yeah,
motivation to sort of, right, I'm determined.
yeah. So it's kind of a little bit strange, isn't it, that a 15-year-old child defeats cholera with the assistance of his father, encouraging him with some sort of reward.
Hmm.
I would have thought, just the fact that his son had got over cholera and hadn't died would be reward enough. But
Well, exactly, yeah.
and I don't know if if you're lying in bed with cholera, does the thought of going off to engineering school in Austria suddenly make you start to feel better? Do you will this, or is this just another bizarre story? The lightning storm and the visions and so on. But with regard to his mother, as I said a moment ago, also inventing lots of household appliances, I can't find any of them.
Can't find them. No. Well, I suppose if if you're just doing it for yourself, I always think it's you get somebody who supposedly invented something, and you just wonder, well, they are the ones who patented it and
Yeah,
decided to go into manufacturing or found someone to invest in them. But often people must have invented things they didn't bother to tell anybody else because it just improved their life,
yeah,
and perhaps a few others saw it and went, well, that's a funny looking thing, and then it disappears, through history, and then somebody
mm,
else has kind of come up with the same idea. It's just
mm,
that they're only famous because they've managed to sort of get it patented, or someone's invested in it.
yeah, yeah,
But an interesting man, and he's supposed to have died penniless, but yet in your book he does
yeah.
say he's renting 2 rooms in quite an expensive hotel. So that
Mm.
sort of doesn't quite tally, does it?
Well, apparently, Westinghouse Electrical Company were the people that he was originally in bed with, that backed him when he got to America, to New York. They say paid for those rooms because he'd fallen on hard times, and they felt sorry for him. That they had been paying for those hotel rooms at least for the last 10 years of his life. But I can't find anything on that other than I've heard people say it.
Mm.
I
And
can't
that's
find
the
anything.
problem.
Yeah, because he'd parted company with them a long time ago, and he'd had so many ups and downs. Ironically, as you know from reading the book, his first backer when he landed in New York was J.P. Morgan. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and he went through strange periods of time where he was literally on his knees and having to dig ditches for just a few dollars a day, and then suddenly an investor appears and he's up and running again on 50,000, what the equivalent of $50,000 a month, and
Wow.
and it really is a roller coaster life, which compounds my thoughts even more on, or concerns rather even more on the fact that I can't find any footage of him anywhere.
And there's a connection, I believe, to Donald Trump.
Absolutely, yes. His uncle John. And it's just before I forget this,
Yeah.
because I don't want to lose this train of thought, but have you heard of the adventures of Baron Trump?
Yes.
So
I've got the book actually.
oh, have
Funnily enough,
you?
I have
Yeah.
got the book. Yeah, I did start to read it, but it's what is it, 1700s or
Mm,
something like that.
yeah.
It is in Old English, and I got
Yes.
sidetracked with other books to read. But yes,
Sorry about that.
no, not at all.
Yeah, I just wondered because John Trump. I mean, that when Tesla was found dead in his hotel room by a maid, the first three people that went into the hotel room were the first well, they went three of them went together, but the first one was quite a renowned safe cracker and lock picker that worked with the
Right.
FBI. John Trump, who was with the FBI and a scientist too, and then another scientist who was working with US naval intelligence. And
So
sorry,
no, I was just going to say a lock pick. I mean, did the
mm,
hotel not have keys to these rooms?
it was his safe. They
Ah,
wanted to
right.
get
Oh,
in the
okay.
safe. Yeah, a couple of
Yeah.
hundred documents in there. And there was some delay in them getting the documents and actually taking them to Hoover at the FBI. There was a slight delay. And several of them were never actually to see the light of day again. And these ones, particularly, that they say John Trump kept hold of, were all to do with Tesla's research into time travel.
And that was his uncle. John
John
Trump.
Trump, yeah.
And John Trump is what, the grandfather of Donald or a great
No,
grandfather?
he's uncle.
It's
Donald's
Donald
uncle.
Trump's uncle,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And yeah, he kept hold of the time travel documents and never been seen again.
Right. And how do we know that there were time travel documents?
Well, that's the funny thing. We don't.
We don't.
It's
So
just what we've been told. I mean, the timelines don't stack up, but some people have argued that John Trump and Donald Trump are the same person.
traveling through time.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I mean,
fascinating, isn't it?
yeah, and that's just another rabbit hole, isn't it? That this one in particular, I just don't want to go down,
Yeah.
because how could you prove or disprove that?
Well, absolutely, yeah. Unless you can see it working
Yeah,
and nip into the future or back in time.
yeah, you've got no way of being able to uh, ever find out if that's possible. Because I'd imagine if it is possible to travel in time, and I understand the theory of it, and I think it was the first Superman movie where I think it was the first one where he actually Superman flew around the Earth backwards so many times to go back in time to prevent an event from taking place. God knows whether or not it's actually possible. There'll be people out there who say, "Of course you can't do it,"
Yeah.
but I imagine there are people that haven't studied it and don't certainly don't have a doctorate in any form of physics or quantum physics. So I'm on the fence. To me, it's a little bit. I understand the principle of it slightly, but it's over my head completely.
Anything is possible, it seems, at the moment, with so many weird things
Mm,
going on in the world that we're hearing about with the aliens and spacecraft that move beyond physics and things like that. So,
mm.
I've just taken the idea that everything, I'll accept everything, but some things are on the table, but not as in easy reach as many other things.
Yeah,
If you
absolutely.
see what I mean. Um, so he died penniless. He had these inventions. He did some amazing things. What was the just give us an outline of what the Tesla coil then, because I noticed and what that was, because
Mm.
I notice in your book you've got lots of pictures and you talk about Tartaria and stuff, and you show these pictures and you say,
Mm.
look, there's technology that's similar to Tesla, and it may have been that he was actually decoding Tartarian technology,
Yeah,
shouldn't you say?
yeah. I mean, that's something that I believe myself. That I, I've asked this question before, and I've been asking people this for a very long time, at least the last 30 years. That how is it possible somebody can wake up one morning and invent something that changes the course of history without having seen it before or being guided? We know from sort of old tales of uh, indigenous tribes going back a very, very long time ago that people appeared from the sky, people appeared from the sea, and they showed them, new forms of technology and taught them mathematics and the constellations and so on. And I just wonder whether or not, if Tesla was the person we've been told, was he being helped by somebody else or something else? Was he either being shown this stuff? Because his obsession, his main passion throughout his entire life was the possibility of sending electricity wirelessly. Now, because of that, and my interest and research into the Tartarian Empire, that is where my suspicions became aroused, because Tartaria, or the Empire of Tartaria, was also known as the Empire of Free Energy,
Right.
and that they were using antennas on top of rooftops that we would call today lightning conductors. They were using those to harness energy from the ether. Now, Tesla's one of the few people that actually has put in writing, um, or at least we think he put it in writing, that there is energy created by the Earth through the Earth's magnetic crust and also through the ether. Electromagnetic energy transmitted between the North and the South poles, and that can be harnessed. So he's talking there about the same technology that people that research and write about Tartaria are talking about, where these rooftops had what appeared to be lightning conductors, and they would harness this energy, and then they would be stored in tanks, often filled with red mercury with copper wiring inside, and became, I suppose, the equivalent of a large battery. So these rooftops had these capacitors, and they were storing and harnessing this energy, and that's essentially what the Tesla coil was doing. His obsession was to transmit energy across the world, and here's his downfall: for free.
Mm-hmm.
He
Well,
wanted, yeah,
yeah, because as soon as you offer something like that for free and free energy, you know that those with a vested interest,
mm,
like in all these types of things where you can offer something hell of a lot cheaper than the 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 capitalists who've got the monopoly on something, they're not very happy about it and will do anything
no,
to prevent that from getting out because of the financial implication.
yeah, yeah. I mean, J.P. Morgan. The reason J.P. Morgan backed Tesla was because at the time Tesla was really working on wireless energy, but he was at the same time publicly working on radio transmission, and he wanted to be able to broadcast radio transmissions across the world wirelessly.
Mm.
JP Morgan was interested in this because he realized that if he backed that and got involved at the start and became the backer and investor of Tesla, that he would not only be the person who ultimately owned wireless radio transmissions, but he could control what was being transmitted.
Yes.
But Marconi beat him to it. And I think Marconi took credit for about 17 patents that actually Nikola Tesla had invented, but Marconi was just a little bit more of a shrewd kind of guy and
Yeah.
much more efficient businessman. I would question, for anybody who's read anything about Nikola Tesla, that he lacked, the one thing he did lack was business acumen. He,
And that doesn't surprise me because you get loads of people who are inventors
mm,
or artists, and they're hopeless businessmen because that's not really their focus. It's not
mm,
about making money and
no,
selling and having distribution chains and things like that. They're so focused on unraveling a problem and
mm,
finding a solution and then going, well, how can we do this and how can we do that? I can absolutely get that many people and many artists would tell you, you know,
mm,
I paint or I do things in clay, but I'm hopeless at selling these things
yeah.
because that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. And I think when you are creative, I think it's very easy to be your own worst critic as well. And,
Yes.
and perhaps devalue your work, and don't see the value in it that other people perceive. And I think that becomes the problem. But with Nikola Tesla, he was obsessed with giving people free energy. And that would be anybody's downfall right now. I mean, there are people that have followed in his footsteps that have all had quite tragic ends, which,
You list them in the book actually,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
and there are videos out there of
mm,
you know going through these people, which is it is quite frightening, and you do wonder if there was a sinister hand behind it. Not possibly saying that there was,
yeah, absolutely.
but it does look like coincidence is you know hard to believe, and each and every one of those,
Mm,
particularly as they've just invented or just done this, and they're about to announce it to the public, and
mm,
something happens. You know, it's
yeah,
very unfortunate for them.
yeah,
So yeah, so the question is whether Tesla exists or what have you. But your book is much broader than just Tesla, of course. And
yeah.
last time you were on, you were talking about the orphan trains and the Cabbage Patch Kids, which was really
Mm,
fascinating. And you go into quite a lot of detail about Tartaria and many of the different things. And you include some amazing pictures, which are quite startling for people to see. These amazing star cities, for example, these wonderful buildings. And as a result of having you on the show, I myself have gone down these rabbit holes in which I've started to think,
mm,
hang on a minute, we had electric cars before, we had electric scooters, the Autoped, I think it's called,
yes.
these old batteries, this the technology, and then these amazing houses and buildings that seem to have suddenly sprung up in a mere a few years,
Yeah.
which would takes us 10 years to do. I mean, how long have they been trying to put just a road down or
Mm,
the railway? Sorry, the railway net. The what do they call
mm.
it? The it's that big railway
Oh,
that the
yes. Yeah,
oh
I
my
can't remember
the
it
term has
either.
just gone out of my head.
Yeah, it's
And
a letter and a
the
number, isn't it? I think I
yeah
can't
number
remember.
yeah everybody knows what I mean. And
Yeah.
even that is like, phew, blimey. And
Mm.
the tunnel, the what's the name tunnel between England and France.
Oh, the Eurotunnel.
Yeah, the Eurotunnel.
Yeah.
Again, all the bureaucracy and the
Mm,
planning and the
mm,
surveys and the digging, these things don't happen that quickly. And yet across the world, the same technology, or sorry, the same artistic design, the Greco-Roman Greco design
mm,
seems to, like, everyone's gone, oh yeah, we'll have that, we'll have that, we'll have that. And it's popped up
mm.
everywhere in the same sort of time period, which has got to surely get people going, well, that's a bit weird, isn't it?
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? I mean, some of the backstories to some of these buildings are incredible. I was looking at one the other day, and it's the City Hall in Antwerp. And I decided to have a little dig at it because the City Hall in Antwerp, to me, looks like a Tartarian building. This very gothic looking structure. And I look at the rooftops and I see the spires there, and they look exactly uh, what we would expect to find. So I decided to do a bit of digging, and I looked at the architect that they say designed it. They then go on to say that he built a tower at a church. I'm still digging, so it's fresh in my mind. But I can't for the life of me remember the name of this particular church, but it's something like St. Paul's. In fact, I think it was called St. Paul's. Um, and they say that he built this tower, this monument that's a tower in the grounds of the church. And I had a look at the date that the tower was erected. And then I realized that the year that the tower was put up in this church by the architect of City Hall in Antwerp, he was 8 years old.
Right.
So sometimes I think they rush some of these narratives. And I found that has happened so many times, not just with Tartarian buildings or what we would call Greco-Roman buildings, or backstories with the Vatican or the White House, uh, but more so with the world's fairs, these incredible cities that popped up usually in around 18 months from scratch, a bit of barren wasteland or marshland, and suddenly there's a magnificent city there that looks something like it looks like what you'd expect to see in Rome or Pompeii or somewhere like that.
Right.
And normally within a month or two of these world fairs and exhibitions ending, they burn down or they're demolished.
Which is, I mean, that is preposterous, isn't it? You think
Mm,
of the Millennium Dome.
mm,
That took several years to put together. They
mm.
saw the millennium was coming up. We'll have, and it's not exactly a difficult building, is
No.
it? I mean, it's just a dome with a
Mm,
few towers holding the structure up. Very
mm.
simple physics, I suppose,
Yeah.
in the architecture. And you've built this on a bit of waste ground. And they didn't knock it down immediately after the millennium, which they could quite easily have done, I suppose.
Mm,
They've repurposed it.
mm.
Is it still the O2 Arena?
It
I
is
don't
the
know.
O2 Arena, yeah. Yeah.
And if you've gone to the trouble and the miraculous ability to knock up a city in 18 months
Mm,
with technology, without the use of all the technology that we have now, big cranes, JCBs, and all the sort of stuff
mm.
that you're doing with basically horsepower,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, you would think that the world would be so proud of such an achievement.
Mm,
And unless it was made out of cardboard or something,
mm.
or some sort of basic material that isn't going to last, and so that's the only way they could do it. So it was like building a set.
Mm.
Why would you not keep it?
I know. I know. And there are some world fairs. The Chicago World Fair, they say that a quarter of the population of America traveled there to see it.
Right.
How? Where
Well,
did they stay? Let alone how did they get there? This would have been by horse and cart or horse and buggy, I'm
the,
assuming,
what year are we talking about?
late 1800s.
So they may have had some trains. I mean, it's
Possibly. Yeah. Oh,
unlike
yeah. Yeah.
unlike Britain, which was sort of, because we're a small country, trains sort of started becoming into vogue, I suppose, about
Mm.
1840s
Yeah.
onwards. All, initially private ones. So I suppose they would have to have laid a train on, but a quarter of the countries. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
hell of a long journey because it's what is it,
Yeah.
3,000 miles across?
Got to be. And where? But more confusing than that is, where did they stay?
Right, and
How
then they had
did
to be
you?
fed.
Yeah. I mean, Disneyland couldn't cope with that.
No, that's true. And these are sort of questions that, normally we just sort of read something and you go, oh, okay, it was busy then, was it?
Mm,
But actually, when you think, hang on a minute, just think about the how you do that.
mm,
You've got to feed them, you've got to water them, they've got to
mm,
be accommodation. Did they all turn up in caravans?
mm.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and for me, these world fairs, they seem to be Tartarian cities, white cities, and I think that that what they've been used for is, they've sort of come up with a reason for these places being there, and said, well, we built these so we can have an exposition, or you know, a little bit like a very, very grand version of the Ideal Home exhibition, I suppose, in
Right.
many ways.
But
And
would people not know that they were, if you're saying that they were already there and they were
mm,
giving them an excuse to be there,
mm,
would people not know it if they'd been there 20 years ago and gone, what are you talking about? This is not a new
mm,
place. This has always been here since I've been a lad.
mm.
Would they not have noticed that?
Well, that's all part of the Tartarian Empire falling. The people that were around there, that used to live there, had long gone.
Right.
A lot of these cities, and again, I mentioned it in the book about, in Iron County, there was a particular town where a preacher had said during a sermon that there is a town here where all of the buildings are empty. You can come and almost help yourself, and there are more towns like this, and that really sort of helps confirm a lot of Tartarian researchers' suspicions that after the mud floods and the comet of 1811, and really all the civil wars where these Tartarian people were wiped out, that these cities were empty. There was nobody around, and you can actually go onto the internet and type in empty streets of St. Petersburg, for example. And you want to be looking at very early, the oldest you can find images of St. Petersburg. But if you just type in on an image search, empty streets of, and then pick a town, and you'll find, the very old
Wow.
images, they appear to be abandoned. And obviously, these photos would have been taken at a time where, there wasn't any artificial lighting. So it wasn't like they were on a film set where they could light up the whole of, a particular
No.
square or area. It would have had to have been taken during sunlight, during daytime.
So it wouldn't be a question about very, very long exposures.
No,
Because if you
because there's
take a
nothing
pic,
blurred in it.
right.
You'd
I, d-
expect with a long.
You'd expect to
Sorry,
see
Richard.
some, I was just going to say,
Mm,
because just so those people who don't know, if you take a very, very long exposure, and I forget what the other settings that you need, but you can photograph so that things that are moving, if you get it right, you can almost eliminate them because if your exposure is over, say, an hour,
mm,
then all the things that are moving would not appear.
mm.
But there would be enough stationary things.
Yeah.
A milkman delivering milk, for example. They may
Mm,
not have had a milkman back then, but a hearse, for example. You would
mm,
expect to see a little streak
mm,
because even if it's moving very, very slowly, it would have been picked up. So there's
mm.
none of that, and
No.
they couldn't be airbrushed. These pictures, I take it.
No, they've actually done the reverse. So if you look at old, very, very early photoshopping, then there are people painted onto a lot of old photographs of towns
Oh
and
right,
cities. Yeah, and
to
you
make
can,
them look populated.
yeah, yeah, and that's a phenomena that you can find. There's actually a couple of people who've done quite impressive podcasts on that. Um, and that falls into a category where they call what they call vanilla skies. where what they would do is they would take a photograph of a particular town or a building or a street in a city, and they would put a different background behind it.
Right.
And then often people would start to spot that the same formation of clouds appeared behind lots of different, towns and cities. And then you'd zoom in and see, a horse and cart, and actually zoom in a bit closer and see that this has been painted
Right.
onto the actual plate. And they could obviously layer the plates up. And
Oh,
so
yeah. So like you would do in Photoshop, different layers of
absolutely,
yeah, but with
yeah,
plate glass. I suppose one of the reasons, of course, you say it's Vanilla Skies, and the cheeky chappy and me says, oh, that's they're probably just hiding the chemtrails. But of course, they didn't have airplanes in those days.
no, but
But
yeah,
they
you're
did have
quite.
airships, didn't they? Now
They
you talk
did.
about that, and it wasn't until I saw somebody else's video that I didn't realise, and I may have mentioned this before when we were last on, the airships. People always think of the little carriage that hangs underneath the
Mm,
airship as being where people were,
mm,
but actually they were inside
mm.
the fabric of the superstructure,
Yeah,
which is fascinating, and what a very pleasant way to travel.
yeah, absolutely, and you can see why. I mean, I would argue that the demise of the airship was really once again down to this sort of petroleum or oil industry, with
Right.
with certain people wanting us to use planes instead, because at that time they say the Tartarians used airships to travel around the world freely at their own will. And then all of a sudden we had passports introduced, and we were told where and when we could go to certain places, and then we had obviously the famous disaster, and that was the end of that.
So yeah,
Um,
so like the Hindenburg and R101
mm,
in England. Well, it crashed in France, didn't it? I think. But it was from Bedford. They had the R101, and I read a book
mm,
about it. And yeah, they were the sort of the last of the airships.
mm,
I think on the R101, the Minister of Transport was on there of the time, and he perished with it, and so it became clearly unsafe for us
yeah,
to do any further, and hence aeroplanes came. And even one of my viewers has suggested, and this is quite interesting, and I haven't got into this yet, that some aeroplanes don't actually use very much fuel at all. There's enough to get it off the
yeah,
ground. Have you heard
yeah.
that?
Yes, I have heard that. Yeah,
So
yeah,
we're getting into another delves of another rabbit hole.
yeah.
Um, but and they say, oh no, all the fuel's in the wings, and you think, well, that would be very heavy, and then it must get
Mm,
light
mm,
as the fuel is used up.
mm,
I do think that the way that we have been taught things has made us accept things in a way that we're not questioning. Like you said, the most simplest thing is if you've got this city in the middle of the desert with no other
mm,
place around and people go there, well, how are
mm,
they being fed? How are they sleeping? Where are they
mm.
going? How did they get there? And how did they go home? And I think in there you talk about people do get kids did get lost
Yeah,
and were never never found.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. There's a common theme to that, isn't there? That
Yeah.
seems that. Yeah, it doesn't matter how far back you go. It's the children always seem to be at risk. But yeah, so that's what I find very hard to believe, that over a period of really just a few decades, they had all these expositions and world fairs all over the world,
Mm.
and in America they were, of course, they introduced the incubators, the incubator babies, Dr. Martin Cooney. Um,
Now
and
this is where it gets really sinister, doesn't it?
it is dark, yeah. I mean, the narrative is that the babies that were on display in these world fairs were actually loaned by hospitals. Now, I can't see how they would have so many premature babies out there that they would be able to supply all of these world fairs,
No.
with incubators full of babies. They say that in London they were loaned from Paris, and that in America most of them came from New York.
So what's happening to the mothers then? That they're
Yeah,
popping out babies, and they don't want them for some reason,
Yes.
or
So
they can't handle them, and so that these babies are in incubators that are being offered. I mean, it just seems bizarre.
it does, doesn't it? And I mean, I've got a very suspicious thought train, really. But
I'm not
I,
surprised.
my instant thought with this was, or suspicion was, that the mothers had been told that the baby had been stillborn.
Oh, right. And yet they weren't. They were
Mm,
kept alive.
yeah, but
That's
there are some people that would argue that these babies were cloned.
right.
And that's why there were so many of them. Literally every country, at least every country, and by that what I mean is, um, some countries had more than one world fair or exposition. Some would have several. Um, so, some countries would, let's say, for example, America has 3 or 4 world fairs over a very short period of time.
Yes.
You'd need an awful lot of babies just to be able to supply those particular events themselves. These happened all over the world. So, and that's where apparently Alice Guy, the first movie maker, director, and actress of a narrated movie, that's where she got the inspiration from for the first narrated movie that ever came out, which is the Cabbage Patch Fairy. It was the incubators that filled with these babies that inspired her to make it. And the weird thing is with that this actually shows people going to cabbage patches and buying babies,
Which is a very weird notion.
isn't it?
I,
It's
I mean,
bizarre.
weird that I mean, it's quite horrible. But I mean, you could do it in a fairy story, because
Yeah,
I think we spoke about. I said, that's interesting, because you have this myth when you're a kid. You're told, you're brought by the stork, or
yeah,
you're found. You're not being told the truth that you were created in a mother's stomach. And possibly that myth that you're being brought by the stork might actually have some element of truth, that
mm,
you were incubated or even created in some. I mean, we hear of test tube babies now,
mm,
and you do
yeah,
wonder. You wonder. And somebody sent me a video. Now I can't vouch for this, but somebody sent me a video even recently, and said, "You remember in 2020 we had a certain crisis across the world." Without mentioning certain names, and
mm,
people were doing tests. They stuck something up their nozzle
mm,
to do tests. Well, it's somebody sent me a video and said that's nothing to do with testing for the problem that we had, but actually there was something on the tester
yeah,
that that is there to alter people's DNA.
yeah, yeah,
And a whole load of, I won't go into it because I don't want this video to be cancelled. But even now we see almost a repeat pattern of weird
mm,
things that are happening to either our physique but also to children.
mm.
And so it lends some credence that people were doing it a few hundred years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I'd been told that too, that there was a chemical on the end of that particular swab, and that isn't solely
What?
for that particular swab, that actually there are other tests that people have on a fairly regular basis where they're swabbed, and the same chemical is actually present there on the end of that swab. I don't want to say what it is on here,
No,
but
no, quite.
it's
But
yeah,
people, astute people, are getting the message, all right, and will now no doubt be searching that.
yeah,
But it just goes to show, if they're doing it now, then things like that, whatever technologies they did have, they must have been doing things before. I always think when you hear the government or a news outlet saying we've now opened up this box that was not supposed to be open for 30 years based on government decisions, and you
mm,
open it up and you see all the lies that the government have told, and the
mm,
truth comes out, and you think, well, if they were doing that 30, 50, 70 years ago, what makes you
mm,
think they're not doing it now, that they've
mm,
suddenly cleaned up their act? And it strikes me that these things were going on at the same time in the past with
mm.
whatever technology. So it's your belief that the technology of the past has been eradicated so that we have a lesser technology that's more controllable by certain globalist elites, or parasites, as you quite rightly call them, so that we can't have things like free energy, or our travel is restricted because we need something that makes somebody else the money.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that whenever we get technology, whenever something new comes into the arena, that it's not until it's in a position where either they can financially benefit from it, or it can be used to, in one way or another, control us slightly more than we already are. And I suppose for anybody out there that uses Siri, and I can't remember the name of the Amazon one.
Oh,
Um,
oh yes.
I can't remember. I don't.
No, I don't. I don't use
That
it.
is definitely, yeah, it's not for me. But that's there to make our lives easier, where we can just ask this thing, you know, anything we want to know, or to turn some music on, or adjust the lights. And we do this under this sort of misguided apprehension that this is only listening to us when we say, "Hey Siri," or whatever it is.
Mm.
Well, of course, if it can hear that, then it's always on. And
Well,
so
it's
many,
listening for that command, isn't it?
yeah. And I've also been told by several people that, your typical smartphone is actually taking a photo every 20 seconds. It's actually
Yes.
taking a shot of whatever it can see every 20 seconds, all the time, permanently. So I think that when we get new technology, it's not until it's been perfected in a way in which it can either cause us damage, has an element of control, or can cause incredible distraction for us. And we see that now, don't we, with phones? If you go into a restaurant, you'll often see the entire family sat on their phone telling everybody else on social media what a great time they're having,
Yeah.
without actually having a great time or
So,
talking to the people they're with.
yes.
And I think they're dumbing us down. We don't know really what damage is being caused to us by these products, especially things that have Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connectivity. We don't know the harm that they're doing. Um, we know with 5G, I think there's something like 26,000 reports now that have been done into the damage that they cause. But they're not in the public arena, so people don't have access to them. It doesn't make the news. So I think going back to the World Fairs, that they were putting technology out there that had been around for a very long time, but it wasn't until they'd perfected it in a way in which either they could financially benefit from it, or it would have some element of damage that it would cause, a very much a slow burn, which, I think certain medical interventions were designed to have a slow burn,
Yes.
to reduce suspicion.
Yes.
And
Well,
I
if
think,
it all happens too quickly, people are know about it and will
yeah,
rise up, won't they?
yeah, absolutely. And maybe you wait till something else is out there that it works in conjunction with, that can be tweaked and adjusted to increase the effects of it. And so that's what I think that the world fairs were, and possibly Nikola Tesla was doing, that they were reverse engineering antiquitech, or old technology, Tartarian, and predating that, that was already out there, but they didn't want us having it. So if we can transmit energy and information wirelessly for free, let's give it to the public once we can get them fixed on a monthly contract where they're having to
Absolutely.
pay for it.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
quite. That your book, which is, it's only just been published
Mm.
now, and it's hot off the press, and people can go and buy it, and we'll put the link in the description. I mean, it does open people's minds. I think one of the things that I get from it is you're asking people lots of questions.
Mm.
How is this possible? You share your thoughts, obviously. I mean, some of the things that you ask, say, I've just opened it there at random. The asylums.
Mm.
There seem to be a lot of people who all of a sudden seem to be mad or mentally insane, or were not tolerated by society.
Mm.
And then apparently these wonderful and very beautiful
Mm.
buildings
Mm.
were given to them, of
Mm.
all people. And you just
Yeah.
think, that is a bit odd, isn't it? Why have you built these beautiful Greco-Roman style
Mm.
architectural buildings, grand buildings,
Mm.
and you put in supposedly the mentally insane?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, there are two issues with it. One is the buildings themselves, and inside these buildings, they're incredible. The architecture that's gone into them, and some of the sculptures inside, and the artwork, the grounds themselves are manicured. Why would you do that for the people that you no longer want in society? My argument is that these buildings were already there,
Mm.
and let's they're in the middle of nowhere. Let's stick these people that will not adopt
Conform.
to new, yeah, or not conform. Let's lock them up. But also, by locking people away, it obviously gave the parasites or the establishment the access to their children, and the Lunacy Act, which came out just after, not long after the reset of 1776. Um, the reasons that you could be committed were incredible. And I think I've mentioned this before, like having women's problems or reading too much, falling off a horse. But the key one was if you had lost your husband in war.
You'd be locked up.
Yeah, yeah, that
And
was grounds for being committed to an asylum. So your husband goes out there to fight against the New World Order and dies in it, and then you lose your children and get locked up, and the
yeah,
children become the repopulation of the world, and new history, new surname, new narrative, and away we go. And that was going on right until we had the orphan trains movement, and so I think that that's what happened. And for the people, the men out there that didn't die in war, a lot of those were sent to prison for not conforming. And the prisons are the same thing. And obviously, I know jails existed a long time ago, but prisons themselves, uh,
right.
that happened just after the reset too. And all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of people were being locked up. So you've got a lot of women being sent to asylums and a lot of men being sent to prisons and a lot of children up for grabs.
It's a fascinating uncovering or unraveling of and questioning what has gone on. In our previous interview, we were talking about the reset of 1776,
Mm.
which of course you mention in here, and a lot of it is sort of goes back to, and you ask the question: are we in the process of the next reset? And we know that the WF have announced that there will be a great reset. They want one in their on their terms, and we're sort of going, well, actually a reset is necessary, but without you lot, thank you, you
Yeah,
parasites.
yeah,
That would be,
absolutely.
and there does seem to be a very slow awakening from our side,
Mm.
and a pushback. Um, the book is available from where? Where can people get it?
Well, it's available on Amazon. I had no option other than to do that at the time.
Yeah.
And some people have cringed when I said that, but it's available hardback, paperback, and ebook. But I've also got a supply too. So if someone wants a signed copy, they can just get in touch.
And do you have a website or just an email?
Just an email.
Well, we'll put that in the description. I can take. It's a lovely design. There's old Tesla, and it's a lovely book. The hardback, if you can afford the hardback, that's well worth having because it's very beautifully done. I think despite the fact that it is Amazon and there are other self-publishing
Mm,
places over there, they're all pretty much of the same now. But the quality, I remember sort of doing some self-publishing myself a few,
mm.
well, 5, 10 years ago now, and it was a real crappy old thing. But now they do them really nice, don't they? And you must be very pleased with it.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, as an absolute accident, I sent one to my brother who lives in Tenerife and he's staying with my mum for a few days in Hertfordshire. And she opened his post and she started reading it. I'd already warned her not to read it. I said, "This isn't for you, mum. You do still watch BBC News and believe that, they want the very best for you."
Yes.
And so this is in your case, this is nightmare fuel. She read it cover to cover. She said it was absolutely incredible and couldn't put it down. That's the last person I aimed the book at.
There you go.
So
How about that?
yeah, so I've got to say, out of all the feedback I've had, that was the most surprising positive feedback I could have got. I actually didn't want her to read it. I don't want to give the woman nightmares. She worries enough as it is. So,
Well, there we are. It is a great read. It is very readable, which is nice. You've got lots of pictures in there, which you allude to, and they're all in the centre of the page. It's an eye opener. It does make you go and think, oh, hang on, I'm going to go and check that, and you can go and have a look at a building that's supposed to have been founded in 1888, and then you find above it it says it was 888, and you go, well, where's the one gone? Where's that? And you have a reason for that. But we've given away quite a lot of the secrets of the book. We don't give them all away, of course. So it's Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. It's a great read. It'll open your mind. And is there a follow-up book?
yeah, there was one, but now there's two. I think first of all, I thought of doing an A to Z. Now, a lot of younger people out there won't know what an A to Z is, but I used to use that to get around, before sat nav. I wanted to do an A to Z of Tartarian towns and cities and pick one town or city in every country and literally go from A to Z and give them all a building that they can go and have a look at.
Oh, right. That's good.
Yeah. So, and that's hence Antwerp, why I was looking at City Hall in Antwerp, because the first one I picked, for an 8-year-old to have been involved in some of the architecture is fascinating. So, but the other one is that I think I'd like to explore the World's Fairs and Expositions more.
Yes.
Because there were so many of them. And this is where, really, like I said earlier on, the Ideal Home Exhibition equivalent, this is where new technology was launched. Anything that was happening, from all sorts of things. I think even juicy fruit chewing gum was launched at a World's Fair.
Good heavens.
So I think that's worth
that would be.
at.
I would love to read your take. I've got a book on my shelf called "The World for a Shilling." I forget who the author is, and it talks about I think the London World Fair, and you could go for a shilling and go around. That's the title of the book. And
that would have been Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I think it. Well, to be honest, I haven't actually read it. I bought it because I wanted to do some research on something else, and then I got distracted. But I've read bits of it. I pick my books up and read a paragraph here and a paragraph there. But absolutely fascinating. The World for a Shilling. But it'll be interesting to see your take on the World's Fair. So I encourage you to do that. But thank you so much for coming on the show. And telling us about your book and about Tesla. And did he exist? We'd be interested to see what the comments are going to make.
Yeah.
And like you said, if anyone's found some old footage of Tesla or some more photos, that would be quite good.
Yeah.
A scrapbook. Somebody somewhere must have a scrapbook where it's got his pictures in it that I've never been seen. We'd love to expose that on the show for the first time. But yeah, there we go. Well, there we are. Thank you so much, guys. Been lovely to have you back on again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back on, Richard.
And you can buy. We'll put the links on the thing for the books so that you can get those. But in the meantime, I will be back, of course, with more monologues and more wonderful guests with more strange and weird things for you, hopefully. But until next time, from Guy and I, thanks for watching.
Thank you.
And take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.